I think that it's not so much difficult as it is different to live from the heart. It's taking the time, listening more, observing more, and realizing that every person deeply matters and that every conversation, every encounter, every circumstance provides the opportunity for an opening of some kind, a deeper experience of life, of who we are and who other people are.
Hi, Marianne.
Hi.
Thank you very much for being here in Olala.
Thank you very much for having me here. I'm honored to be here.
What does it mean to you to bring your teachings and conscious leadership to this country, to Argentina? It's your first time in Argentina.
Well, first of all, when I come someplace, I don't think that only I'm bringing something. I'm receiving something as well. I think that we are living at a time when international travel is more than an indulgence. It's an important way of receiving information and recognizing the unity of the human family right now. And clearly, Latin America is important, any Latin American nation. We're going through a very difficult time in my own country. And there is a sense that those with a more international perspective will ultimately carry the day. We're living at a time on the planet where we absolutely must shift from a competitive model to a collaborative model. And that includes among nations for the sake of your children, your grandchildren. So I'm here to participate in something, not in some grandiose way to bring my teachings. I think that's very much the old paradigm.
How can we change our mindset to be more collaborative and not so competitive?
We all know the truth that is etched on our hearts. And many people, certainly I think a critical mass of people on the earth, recognize that there is an old way of thinking that has in many ways gotten us to where we are. Einstein famously said, "We will not solve the problems of the world with the same kind of thinking that we had when we created them." I think that it's not so much difficult as it is different to live from the heart. It's taking the time, listening more, observing more, and realizing that every person deeply matters and that every conversation, every encounter, every circumstance provides the opportunity for an opening of some kind, a deeper experience of life, of who we are and who other people are. I believe there's one truth spoken in many different ways. Some people are entering this new kind of thinking from a religious perspective, some from a spiritual perspective, some from a secular perspective. But it's the gestalt of this moment to be kinder, to be more merciful, to be more forgiving, to be less judgmental. These are the things that will counter and be an antidote to some of the rampant and atrocious forms of hatred that are doing nothing short of threatening the survival of the species over time.
It is very nice what you said, but do you think really it's possible to bring love to big corporations?
Well, what we need, obviously, is a change in consciousness. And we need much greater moral and ethical dedication at the core of how huge multinational corporations operate. The fact that corporate profits have replaced democratic and humanitarian values in so many cases, in the ways nations operate, the damage that this is doing to people, the damage this is doing to animals, the damage this is doing to the earth itself, is something that enough of us recognize now. Every time a CEO, every time a corporate shareholder becomes more and more aware of the importance of every stakeholder, that the employees are stakeholders, that the earth itself is a stakeholder, these changes are happening. But they have to happen more quickly, and that's the difficult part of this moment, because it cannot be direct confrontation. That will only cause suffering and violence. But we do need an upliftment of the consciousness of humanity, and we need it fast. Now, one of the things that I'm talking about on this trip is leadership. But we need to move beyond thinking of leadership only as the corporate leadership or the political leadership, particularly since so many of the institutions that we look to for leadership have clearly failed us. Don't seem to be so much on the side of humanity as a whole as on the side of a relatively few people who have done so well on the planet that they were able to hoard so many resources at the expense of others. So I think that we all need to find our inner leader. Being a mother is a leadership position. Being a citizen is a leadership position. Anything we do, we can summon the aspect of ourselves that holds the space for the brilliance of others. And I think that that's really a profound meaning and awakening of this moment, that we farmed out too much of our best thinking. We farmed out to political institutions, to academic institutions, to business institutions. Oh, they'll handle it, whether it was this or this or this. And now there's this huge awakening to the fact, actually, their so-called leadership got us to where we are, and we, the people of the world, will take it from here.
And how can we find our inner leader?
Well, from a metaphysical and spiritual perspective, the answer is prayer and meditation. The Dalai Lama, His Holiness, said that in order to save the world, we must have a plan, but no plan will work unless we meditate. There is an assault on the nervous system that is built into modernity today, particularly with social media, particularly with so much of the fast happenings and some of the very disturbing happenings that are confronting all of us on a daily basis. If in the morning we will take the time, even if we have little children, it can be done because I think it's healthy for the little children to experience it with mommy. A quieting of the mind, a quieting of the heart, a real dedication. You know, when we think of life on earth, we think in terms of horizontal, what's happening out there, what's happening with other people. But there's a level of the healing of the world now, which will come from a vertical rather than a horizontal level, that we are deepening, that we are less concerned with convincing other people and more concerned with living at our own soulful depths. And I think this is particularly important for women because so many times the depths of our soulful response to life is very different than the patriarchal prejudices of modernity. And I think we are finding each other, those of us who are realizing this. We do not need the majority of the people of the world to wake up to any of this. We need a critical mass, and that's important. Some say only 3.5% would change. And my travels, not only in my own country, but around the world, absolutely convince me that what has gone wrong is not the people. It is the huge forces, whether economic, political, social, technological, and so forth, which are kind of suppressing the deeper impulses for change and regeneration.
And for leaders in corporations, how can they reconcile practicality with spirituality? They can do that?
Well, all that spirituality is the path of the heart. So that means that the corporate leader would say, well, we could make more money this quarter doing it this way, but we could, if doing it that way, harm children, harm people's health and well-being, harm the earth. Now, I understand that in many cases, with the kind of shareholder capitalism that we have, that this is very challenging. There are many people who had corporations that are good people, they have families, and I've talked to enough of them who have said to me, if I did what you wanted, I would get fired and you'd have someone even worse. So this has got to be a change, not only in the consciousness of the CEO, it's got to be a change in the consciousness of the shareholders. Responsible investing, conscious, responsible, societally responsible investing is a big deal now. We need people who own stocks. We need people who are part of these corporations as stakeholders on whatever level to communicate our desires. Mothers, for instance, it's extremely important, but not in a hateful, confrontational style. That's old think right there. We must build bridges. We must have standards, and when it comes to, for instance, the health of our children, there should be zero tolerance for things that we know are harming our children, but still at the same time to recognize the humanity of the person that we are standing up to. Martin Luther King said, you have very little morally persuasive power with people who can feel your underlying contempt. So there's a new kind of social activism, very much based on the nonviolence political philosophy of Mahatma Gandhi. Then Martin Luther King went to India. He brought those principles to the struggle for civil rights in the United States in the 1960s. Now, in countries such as yours, countries such as mine, big countries, advanced democracies, it's time for a great uprising of courage, actually, to be honest, as well as involvement in the kind of societal changes that we need to make.
Some leaders can be afraid of open their hearts because maybe they lose some confidence or authority. I don't know. What do you say to them?
A lot of it has to do with the language you use. I knew when I ran for political office, I was giving the same kind of message that I give when I'm talking to a spiritual audience, but my languaging would be different. And I wouldn't break out in prayer at the end. You know, you can speak deep humanitarian values in a way that display as much sophistication as any other conversation.
And what do you think is the next barrier or I don't know, something that can be difficult for leadership?
Finding the courage. I think
to open our hearts.
Well, not so much to open our hearts as to be willing to say what we believe when our hearts are open. Opening our hearts is not the new barrier. The new barrier, for instance, conviction is a force multiplier. So when 10 people are displaying hate and effectuating hate, if you have 10 people doing that, but you have 90 people who feel love and believe in love, but are pretty casual and pretty quiet about it, the 10 who are trying to effectuate hate will win. There are people, I don't know what's happening in Argentina, but in the United States, for instance, there is this political force called Christian nationalism that has absolutely nothing to do with the Gospels of Jesus. It is as far away as you can possibly get from let us heal the sick, let us help the poor, let us feed the hungry, let us welcome the stranger. And many people who have a much more soulful spiritual devotion to the Gospels know we can't be quiet now. Because if hate is speaking loudly, love cannot afford to whisper. So that's what people are finding now. And I think for women, this is harder. White men in the world are brought up to believe that their opinions matter. We as women were not necessarily brought up with societal permission to share our feelings and our thoughts the same way. We also have this kind of cellular memory of witch burnings and everything else. Plus, we see terrible things that are happening to women all over the world today. Although I think in terms of, if you think of what's happening to women in places like Afghanistan and other places, then I think that's even more motivation for you and me to make sure that we speak. We're speaking not only for them, not only for ourselves, but we're speaking for them as well. We have to hold each other's hands. I think sisterhood is extremely important right now. I think the biggest factor in a woman being able to be successful at speaking her heart is having a sister hold her hand, supporting her, encouraging her, so that she feels she's not alone. And I think that's the next barrier. Am I willing to take the disapproval? Am I willing to take the lack of popularity? Am I willing to take punishment, even if in societies like ours, the punishment is not going to be stoning, but the punishment could still be lack of approval that could lead to job loss or lack of popularity in our business. That's what's going on, I think, today with a lot of women. This is not a moment to shy away from the larger conversations that we need to be having.
And what do you think young people are bringing to new leaderships?
In the Talmud, it says that every generation has its own wisdom. I think the older you are, the more you know certain things. I think the younger you are, the more you know certain other things. So it's actually a very intergenerational moment. And it's not so much one generation bringing anything to the other generation as it is all of us listening to one another. Because we all know things that other people don't know. We all could afford to listen more, observe more, and respect more.
You inspire millions of women with your talks, with your books.
Thank you.
But if you can summarize your message in one sentence, in one idea, what do you want the people to remember?
Humanity has reached a critical moment in our evolution as a species. And like any species, if the collective behavior is unsurvivable, unsustainable for that species, one of two things will happen. The species will either evolve, mutate, move in another direction, or it will go extinct. And I think humanity is beginning to recognize our physical survival, or at least the physical survival of our grandchildren and great-grandchildren, is not necessarily guaranteed if we continue doing what we're doing now. We are violent to each other. We are violent to the earth. As I said earlier, we must shift from this competitive to collaborative paradigm. Otherwise, whether it's AI, whether it's nuclear, whether it's biomedical, chemical, climate, there are so many ways that if we continue the way we're doing, we could make it very, very difficult to survive ourselves. Each and every one of us has a role to play. We have to all think of ourselves as cells in the immune system of humanity. I think it's important to honor our incarnation. You're assigned to Argentina. I'm assigned to the United States. You're assigned to white. You're assigned to black. You're assigned to brown. You're assigned to Jew. You're assigned to Christian. You're assigned to Hindu. You're assigned to Muslim. Wherever you are, make this the kingdom. Make this the corner of the garden that you make more beautiful and more conscious and more loving. And I think that when you do that, you tend to have a sense that there are millions of people all over the world doing the same thing. The conversation that you and I are having now is a conversation people all over the world are having. Different languages, different ethnic filters, but we're all having it. We are living at a moment of two simultaneous realities. They're like parallel universes. One is a world that is clearly crumbling, and one is a world that is struggling to be born, as Arundhati Roy would say. So I think we need to be death doulas to one world and birth doulas to the other, and we need to recognize the urgency of the moment. We all have, especially as women, we have an instinctive knowledge how to be there for our children, and I think when we attend to it, we have an instinctive knowledge how to be there for the world.
You talk a lot of feminine energy. And how can we bring that feminine energy to this reality that we are living?
You know, we've all been taught all our lives that when people are in stress, they go into fight or flight. It turns out that's only true if you're only testing men. Men go into fight or flight. Women go into tend or mend. There's a different aspect of the brain. I think we're all masculine, we're all feminine. But I think that certainly if you're a heterosexual woman, it's like you're majoring in feminine and minoring in masculine this time, and vice versa. We have the natural, instinctive talent, tendency, and orientation to be there for the person in front of us, to make the person in front of us first, to nurture, to nourish.
The empathy.
And empathy. Now, I'm not saying men don't have that, but it's the more natural incarnation. There's the divine masculine as well as the divine feminine. This doesn't mean we're better than men at all. Men are as harmed by patriarchal prejudice as we are. Germaine Greer, the famous, I think she was Australian or New Zealand, I think Australian feminist, said the opposite of patriarchy is not matriarchy, but fraternity. Once again, it's not that women don't know what to do. It's that we're, in too many cases, scared to do it, which is why we need to encourage one another.
And you have this nice thing that we have to work together with men.
And with each other.
Yes.
With each other. I have found, and I don't know how it is in Argentina, but in the United States, if you look at the first wave of feminism back in like the 1970s, it was understood that sisterhood was everything, that none of us would get there unless all of us got there. And a lot of so-called feminist perspective these days is kind of cutthroat. Being there for each other is everything. And I also believe, once again, I don't know how feminism has unfolded in Argentina, but I think in the United States, the mistake was that from the beginning, it should have included more attention to children. I just believe that we're all here to mother the world, every woman, but that can't just be your child or my child. It has to be every mother's child. And I also believe we're here to tend to the home, and the home should be thought of at this point as the earth on which all of us live. So we're not being asked to do anything different than our initial spiritual programming in our creation. through prayer, through meditation, through spiritual practice, we become clearer about what that is. And then we have a choice whether or not to bring it to the world.
I have some quick questions. Yes.
Okay.
A book every leader should read.
Well, that's a tough one that every leader should read. Well, thank you for that. Certainly, I like that. But there's a book that has meant so much to me in my life by the poet Rilke, Letters to a Young Poet. I think it's such a moving, deeply human book, which carries many insights into the deeper levels of the human heart.
A quality every conscious leader must cultivate.
Well, I think that old leadership, 20th century paradigm, is this kind of top-down, just this is the way it is and everybody's supposed to fall in line. Those days are over. First of all, they won't fall in line anymore like that. It's not the world we live in. The leadership today, the model is that the leader is someone in the middle of the circle who holds the space for the brilliance of others. I think that the talent to cultivate is proactively showing respect for those who work within the system, believing in the potential of all those within the system. And if people feel that, if everyone is made to feel like they too have an emotional stake in this, people want more than money now. People want to feel there's meaning and there's purpose to my coming to work every day.
Okay.
So everybody on that level has a stake in what happens. Now, within that, there's plenty of room for accountability. There's plenty of room for standards. I think that's where a lot of people are afraid that if I do this nice guy stuff, that people will not show up the way I need them to. It's counterintuitive, but people will show up even more.
A word that defines the feminine energy of this new era.
Kindness.
Your personal mantra before stepping on stage.
First thing I do is I think of everyone who is in the audience, everyone who I know is going to be there, everyone I don't know is going to be there, and I pull them into my heart. And then I pray that I might say the right things, do the right things. I blast the room with love before I begin. So I center myself within that. A Course in Miracles says I don't have to know exactly what I'm going to say. I just have to center myself in the correct placements. Now, within that, I think it really serves people to understand from a spiritual perspective, the subconscious knows what to do. If you know your material, then get up there, be present in the moment, and let it rip.
Love in one sentence.
Well, it's not just one sentence, I'm sorry. The Course in Miracles says, or maybe it is one sentence. It actually is one sentence. So let me start with that one again. A Course in Miracles says, this course does not aim at teaching the meaning of love. It aims at removing the barriers to the awareness of love's presence.
That's beautiful. Thank you very much.
Thank you.